Have you ever asked yourself this brutal question? Why do I keep avoiding the very things I say I want? Why do I make plans, set goals, visualize the future, and then watch myself sabotage it again and again? Why do I stay up late promising that tomorrow will be different, only to wake up and do the same thing all over again? You tell yourself you're just lazy, you're weak, you're undisciplined. But deep down, you know that's not quite the full story. There's something else. A quiet, invisible resistance that shows up when it's time to act, and you can't explain it. You just freeze, distract yourself, delay, escape, and then the self-hatred kicks in. That voice in your head. What's wrong with me? But what if I told you that this isn't laziness at all? What if I told you that what you're calling laziness is actually something far more human and far more important? It's fear, unprocessed, hidden, deep. The truth is, most self-sabotage doesn't come from a lack of ambition. It comes from a deep-rooted fear that has never been brought into the light. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of success, fear of being truly seen and still not being enough. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And maybe, just maybe, that's what you've been doing. Not because you're broken, not because you're lazy, but because you've been trying to survive something your conscious mind hasn't yet dared to name. So here's the real question. What are you afraid of? Not what's on your to-do list, not what goal you missed, but what fear is quietly running the show behind the scenes. Because once you name it, you can face it. And when you face it, you take your power back. Before we dive deeper into this journey of the self, if this message is already resonating with something inside you, take a moment to support this space. Like this video so more people can discover what they've been running from. Subscribe to the channel if you're ready to go beyond surface level advice and truly explore the psyche. And turn on the notification bell, not just so you stay updated, but so you become the first to receive the next piece of insight that might change the way you see yourself forever. This isn't content. It's a conversation with your inner world. And the next one might be exactly what you've been needing to hear. Let me tell you a story. It's not about someone famous or wildly successful. It's about someone you probably know, or maybe. It's about you. I had a friend back in college. Let's call him Daniel. Daniel was the kind of person who made you lean in when he spoke. He had that spark, intelligence, depth, and a weirdly magnetic imagination. He'd talk about the app he wanted to build, the book he'd been outlining for years, the business he dreamed of starting. And every time he shared these ideas, there was this fire in his eyes. You could feel it. This person had something. But here's the thing. Daniel never did any of it. The app was never built. The book never started. The business remained a talking point over late-night coffee. At first, I thought he was just lazy. You know the story, the smart but unmotivated type. The guy who could do something brilliant if only he got his act together. I'd give him pep talks, send him articles, and try to motivate him like it was a problem that could be fixed with better time management. But nothing changed. One night, after a few drinks and a long silence, Daniel looked at me and said, "You know why I haven't written that book? Because I'm afraid I'll write it, and it won't be any good. And then it'll prove what I've been trying not to know my whole life, that maybe I am not good enough." That hit me like a freight train. Suddenly, everything made sense. The procrastination, the endless planning with no execution, the "I'm just tired" excuses. It wasn't laziness. It was fear. Not just fear of failure, fear of confirmation. The belief that if he tried his hardest and still fell short, the illusion of potential would vanish forever. That's when I realized Daniel wasn't an exception. He was the rule. I saw him among so many people around me. I saw him in myself. Think about it. How many dreams have you delayed, not because you're too busy, but because you're afraid of what might happen if you actually followed through? We tell ourselves, I'll start when I feel more ready, but readiness never comes. Instead, we loop through endless cycles of hesitation and guilt, mistaking our paralysis for laziness, when in reality, something much deeper is at play. This is where psychology, especially the work of Carl Jung, becomes more than theory. It becomes a mirror. Jung believed that the human psyche is layered, and most of our actions are governed not by conscious choice, but by unconscious forces we haven't yet made peace with. What we label as bad habits are often defenses, sophisticated survival strategies created by the mind to avoid emotional pain. And when Daniel told me about his fear of not being good enough, what I saw wasn't a lazy man. I saw a child still haunted by the fear of not being seen, not being valued, not being enough. Somewhere along the line, he learned that trying and failing was dangerous. So he made a deal with himself. Better to delay, to stay in the safety of potential, than to risk exposing the truth. But here's the cruel irony. In trying to protect himself from pain, he ended up living in a constant low-grade version of it. Because to not try is to betray yourself every single day. And that betrayal, it doesn't scream, it whispers. Through procrastination, through avoidance, through the quiet ache of I could've. You see, Daniel's story I send to unique because it is rare. It is unique because someone finally said it out loud. Most people never do. They just keep calling themselves lazy, when what they really need is compassion and the courage to confront the fear they've been hiding from. You might be one of those people. Maybe you've been holding back on something for years, a creative project, a career move, a conversation that could change your life. And every time you get close, your nervous system hits the brakes. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much. That's what no one tells you about self-sabotage. It's not rooted in apathy, it's rooted in meaning. You fear it because it matters. But here's the hope buried inside the fear. If your resistance is this strong, it means your dream is real. And if the fear is rooted in the unconscious, it can also be brought into the light. The question is, are you ready to look? Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Let that sink in, because what he's saying here is not just poetic. It's terrifying. Most of what drives your behavior, the choices you make, the dreams you abandon, the people you attract, isn't happening in the part of your mind you control. It's happening in the shadows. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is everything you've repressed, denied, or avoided in yourself. It's made up of painful memories, unresolved fears, and deeply rooted beliefs about your own unworthiness. And it doesn't sit quietly. It lives, it breathes, and it acts, just outside of your awareness. So when you sabotage yourself, when you procrastinate, avoid, shut down, it's not because you're weak. It's because a part of you believes it is protecting you from something far worse. Rejection, humiliation, disappointment, or even success. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But here's the paradox. Success can be just as terrifying as failure. Because what if you get everything you want and still feel empty? What if you're finally seen and people don't like what they see? What if your best effort reveals that you were never enough to begin with? That's the voice of the shadow. It whispers things like, "You're not ready. You're going to mess it up. Better to wait until it's perfect." Who do you think you are? And without knowing it, you obey. Not because you want to, but because you've mistaken that voice for your own. But it's not you. It's an echo from a time when you were hurt, judged, or abandoned for being authentic. A time when you learned that playing small felt safer than being seen. Jung understood that the human psyche isn't just a logical machine. It's a living system. And when a part of us gets wounded, especially early in life, the rest of the system adapts. It builds masks, it creates personas. It says, "Don't ever feel that again." And so begins the lifelong dance of self-protection. This is why self-sabotage feels like laziness but isn't. Laziness implies apathy, like you don't care. But if you've ever battled with this, you know how deeply you do care. You cry about it. You hate yourself for not doing it. You stay up at night, overwhelmed with guilt and shame. That's not laziness. That's emotional survival. Your unconscious is trying to protect you from a feeling it believes you can't handle. That is the core of what Jung called the complex and emotional cluster, buried so deep that even thinking about taking action triggers an internal alarm system. Your brain doesn't say, "This project makes me feel vulnerable." It says, "Let's check Instagram again. Let's clean the kitchen. Let's do literally anything else but this." And we obey, because we haven't yet made the unconscious conscious. Jung believed that true freedom begins not with changing our habits, but with confronting our inner architecture, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we deserve, and what is possible for us. These stories often come from childhood. A parent who only praised you when you succeeded. A teacher who humiliated you for failing. A peer group that made you feel invisible when you showed emotion. Bit by bit, your mind said, "Don't try, it's not safe. Don't be seen, it's dangerous. Don't succeed, you'll lose love. Don't fail, you'll be worthless." And these lessons didn't vanish, they sank. They became the script your unconscious follows, and until you rewrite it, you'll keep living it, over and over, thinking it's fate. So what can you do? You don't fight the shadow. You befriend it, you shine a light on it, you say, "I see you. I know why you're afraid. But I'm not that child anymore." This is the essence of what Jung called individuation, the process of integrating the fragmented parts of the self into a whole, not by rejecting the shadow, but by understanding it, healing it, listening to it. Because here's the truth. The part of you that procrastinates is not your enemy. It's a wounded ally. It is trying to keep you from getting hurt again, even if that means never moving forward. Even if it means staying stuck in a life that feels small, repetitive, and deeply unsatisfying. But the moment you realize this, the moment you stop calling yourself lazy and start getting curious about what your avoidance is trying to protect, everything shifts. Suddenly, you're not trapped. You're in a dialogue. You can listen, respond, and slowly make new choices. Carl Jung didn't promise that facing the unconscious would be easy. He promised it would be liberating. And maybe, for the first time in your life, that's what you need. Not another productivity hack, not another morning routine, but the courage to go inward and ask the scariest question of all. What part of me is still afraid to be seen? Because when you answer that, you stop sabotaging, you stop surviving, and you start becoming whole. We live in a society that worships productivity. In today's world, especially in the American cultural landscape, your worth is often measured by how much you do, how fast you move, and how useful you are to a system that never stops. The moment you pause for breath, for reflection, for your own sanity, you're bombarded with guilt. Rest? You're lazy. Boundaries? You're selfish. Slowness? You're falling behind. This isn't just toxic. It's inhuman. We reliving inside what psychologists now call toxic productivity, a relentless pressure to optimize every corner of your life. You're expected to wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, journal, grind, lead, hustle, repeat. And if you don't, you're not just seen as inefficient, you're seen as flawed. But let's ask a deeper question. Who taught you that your worth is tied to what you produce? Who convinced you that you need to be perfect before you can be loved? Because somewhere along the way, you internalized a lie. That, unless you're achieving, fixing, creating, or improving, you are not enough. And when you inevitably fall short of these impossible standards, your mind doesn't offer grace. It offers judgment. You don't just feel like you failed at something. You feel like you are a failure. That's why so many people live with a constant, quiet shame. They're not lazy. They're ashamed. Ashamed of not being perfect. Ashamed of resting. ashamed of needing time. And so they self-sabotage, not because they're weak, but because they're stuck in a culture that punishes softness, slowness, and soulfulness. You see, the American dream has a shadow. It promises freedom, success, opportunity, but quietly demands self-erasure in return. The dream says you can be anything, but only if you keep producing, keep smiling, keep grinding. And if you burn out, that's your fault. You didn't try hard enough. This is where the inner war begins. Your soul is begging for space, but the world tells you that space is laziness. Your body is asking for rest, but your culture tells you rest is weakness. You feel a calling to slow down, to listen inward, but every notification, every productivity guru, every rise and grind quote screams, keep going, don't stop. You'll fall behind. And so you keep going until you can't, until you collapse into procrastination, into avoidance, into what looks like laziness, but is actually your nervous system hitting the brakes to protect you from psychological collapse. Let us be honest, your so-called laziness might be the only thing keeping you sane. Your mind isn't broken. It's overloaded. Your spirit isn't weak. It's tired of pretending. Your body isn't betraying you. It's crying for help. Carl Jung warned us, when we live disconnected from our deeper selves, when we silence the shadow, ignore our intuition, and over-identify with the persona, the psyche rebels. Not with drama, but with subtle sabotage. Because if you can't say no, your unconscious will do it for you. So next time you catch yourself procrastinating, next time you can't seem to write the email, make the call, go to the gym, finish the project, pause, not to scold yourself, but to listen. Ask, what am I really feeling right now? What pain have I been running from? What standard am I trying to live up to, and who created it? Because more often than not, your inaction is a protest. A protest against the version of you that was manufactured to survive, not to thrive. Maybe you've never been lazy at all. Maybe you've been exhausted from carrying an identity that was never fully yours. An identity built on pleasing, proving, performing, rather than simply being. And this is the true danger of hustle culture. It doesn't just exhaust your time, it warps your identity. It convinces you that you are only as good as your last accomplishment, that your only value is external, that your inner world is an inconvenience, but that's a lie. You are not a machine. You are not a product. You are a complex, breathing, feeling being, and the fact that you struggle is not evidence of failure. It's evidence that your humanity is still intact. So let this be your permission, not to give up, but to wake up. To stop seeing self-sabotage as a flaw and start seeing it as a flare, a signal, a sacred interruption. A cry from your inner self saying, please stop punishing me for being human. Because the opposite of hustle isn't laziness, it's presence. And presence takes courage in a world that rewards performance. You don't need to be more productive. You need to feel safe. You need to feel seen, first, by yourself. And that begins by rewriting the narrative. You are not failing. You are healing. And healing is not linear. It's messy, slow, non-linear, and holy. You don't need another system to manage your time. You don't need to install another habit tracker or optimize your calendar. You need to stop and ask yourself the one question you've been avoiding. Why do I keep calling myself lazy, when what I really feel is fear? You see, the problem isn't your lack of discipline. The problem is that no one taught you how to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. No one told you that self-sabotage isn't a character flaw. It is an emotional response. No one explained that when you freeze, delay, avoid, you're not choosing laziness, you're choosing self-protection. Carl Jung knew this long before neuroscience proved it. He understood that the human mind is not linear. We don't just decide and then do. We are layered, messy, full of contradictions. And when the unconscious is full of unresolved shame and pain, Even our most conscious intentions will collapse under the weight of fear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung said. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is what you've been calling laziness. But in truth, it's a nervous system response. It's your psyche saying, I don't feel safe doing this. I'm afraid of what it will mean if I try and fail, or worse, if I succeed. That's why healing doesn't begin with discipline. It begins with understanding. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are a human being carrying more than most people can see. And you've been trying to survive in a world that rarely gives you the tools to heal. And the truth is, the world around you doesn't want you to slow down long enough to see this. Our culture celebrates speed, production, and performance. It teaches you that if you're not growing, scaling, grinding, you're falling behind. But here's what hustle culture will never tell you. You can't shame yourself into healing. You can't outperform your inner wounds. You can become more if you done to feel safe being who you already are. So let's tell a new story. Let's imagine that procrastination is not the enemy, but a teacher. That your avoidance is a signal, not a sentence. That your fear is a gateway to truth, to healing, to wholeness. This is the work of individuation, the heart of Jungian psychology. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole, not becoming more productive, but more real. You don't need to eliminate your shadow. You need to integrate it. You need to bring home the parts of yourself you've spent years exiling. The part that was hurt and never healed. The part that was rejected and never accepted. The part that still whispers, am I allowed to rest? And integration doesn't happen through force. It happens through awareness, through gentleness, through radical honesty. So today, I want to offer something countercultural. A different kind of challenge, not to do more, but to feel more. To sit in stillness, even for 5 minutes, and ask, what am I afraid of? What would I do if I believed I was already enough? What part of me have I been punishing instead of listening to? This is the beginning. This is how we heal, not through control, but through connection. Connection to yourself, to your breath, to your own unmet needs. Because the deeper truth is, your avoidance makes sense, your fear makes sense. Even your self-sabotage makes sense. In the story, your unconscious mind is still trying to finish writing, but you're the author now. You can write a new chapter, one where compassion replaces shame, curiosity replaces judgment, and slowness is no longer something to apologize for. You don't need to be a better version of yourself to be worthy. You just need to be a more honest one. And if this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Before you go back to the noise, before you rush into another task, another distraction, another reason to avoid your own truth, give yourself permission to pause. Close your eyes, take a breath, put your hand over your heart, and ask the question your soul has been waiting for. What part of me is still afraid to be seen? And just listen, not to fix, not to force, just to feel. Because once you feel it, you can heal it. And once you heal it, you can live freely, not as a machine of endless output, but as a whole, a worthy, alive human being. And that is enough. If this message touched something deep inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, so it reaches others who are silently carrying this same weight. Subscribe to the channel if you're ready to walk this path of awakening, healing, and deep inner truth, one step at a time. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss the next message that might shift your entire perspective. But most importantly, I want to hear from you. What part of today's message stayed with you the most? Was there a moment that felt like it was written just for you? Drop it in the comments, not just for me, but for someone else who needs to see they're not alone. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And together, we're recreating a space where real conversations, the ones that actually heal, can finally happen. See you in the next video.